Hello, good evening, and welcome to this, our first Twitter Space discussion. I'm Venetia Cadogan from the Barbados Olympic Association. The National Olympic Academy is where I work, and we are so happy to have you here this evening for this discussion, Esports, is it sport? I want to welcome those of you who are already here. I'm excited about this discussion, but this is one of the events to celebrate Olympic Day 2022. I just want to make a plug for our other events and invite you to go to our website and see the other events that we have coming up, especially on Saturday, our fun evening. So this evening, I'm really happy and excited to know that we are going to be looking at this as a topic. I thought from the outset when I looked at in the program that it was an area that would cause much debate, and I look forward to a rigorous discussion this evening. I'm not going to do much talking because I know you're here for the discussion and not to hear speeches. So on that note, let me just say on behalf of the Barbados Olympic Association again, welcome to the discussion, and please share your thoughts, air your views. We look forward to hearing what you think about this topic. Esports, is it sport? At this time, I'm going to invite the program officer in the Academy, Kendia Brathwaite, to introduce the host of the evening's discussion, and enjoy.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Venetia. It's a pleasure to be able to introduce the host, or should I say the lead moderator for this discussion, none other than Alex Jordan. I'm sure she's no stranger to many of you. We all know her starting back on the days of Slam, and we know, of course, she is very much into sports broadcasting. She would have been at the Tokyo Olympics doing sport broadcasting as well. We've seen her on the cricket pitch as well, and therefore she's no stranger to sport and all the areas of sport. I think this topic, Esport, is it sport, is a very interesting discussion for everyone, including her. I know she has some very burning questions, but I will leave that up to her and the panelists. I would like to welcome all panelists who are here with us, and also I would like to say hello to everyone who is watching on YouTube and Facebook, as we are streaming there as well. So without further ado, Alex, the floor is over to you, and guys, enjoy the discussion.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Kendia Brathwaite, who's the program officer. And thank you, of course, to Venetia Cadogan, who's the director of the National Olympic Academy. Good evening, everyone who's here in Barbados. Hello, and everyone else who might be anywhere else around the world. Welcome to Esport, Is It a Sport? I've really been looking forward to this evening's conversation as well. As we all know, we are deep into the fourth industrial revolution already. That is defined as the blurring of boundaries between physical and digital and biological worlds. This is what we live in. So esport is a sport is a wonderful discussion. And I'd like to commend the Barbados Olympic Association for it. It's progressive. We need to have it. I'm delighted. We'll soon get into it. We have a great panel who I am going to ask to introduce themselves and just say one brief thing on our title in just a minute. But I thought I would start this evening's discussion just by reading the two definitions I found on Google, one for sport and one for esport. The definition of sport, as per Google, activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. And an esport is a multiplayer video game played competitively for spectators, typically by pro gamers. Hey, anyway, what do I know? We have a panel here for that reason. Let's start. I'll call each one individually. If we might be able to start, please, with Mr. Craig Skilling. He's the director of ITE, Esports, assistant professor marketing at Florida Memorial University, and I understand he has some Bajan roots as well. Good evening, Mr. Skilling, and welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Thank you to the Olympic Association, Kendia, everybody involved. Thank you for your question, Alex. No, I'm excited to be here. you set it up well in terms of where we're going as an industry, as a future. And I think, on my side as an academician and a practitioner, this is something that we saw coming years prior. I used to direct the sports management program at an institution, and 2020 pandemic comes, and what happens? They close down. But because I was already writing curriculum for esports, I was in demand and was able to write curriculum for multiple institutions. So we're still now in 2022 answering this question, and people still want to have it and want to know. But here's the thing: it's not changing. It's not going anywhere. For me, I just built an actual team from scratch. So what does that mean? You built out a team. Yeah, we have college students that are looking to game professionally, and they want to be trained that way. So why are we doing that? Why is that happening? And I know we'll get more into it as the discussion goes on, but I'm looking forward to favoring the side that, yes, they are athletes.
Thank you. I got to say, when I was preparing for this, I was thinking, I wonder if I should start the discussion by telling them, no way is esports a sport.
And then let's debate.
Yeah, exactly. However, with my I had long, deep thoughts about it and definitions, and it's a hard one to argue. Anyway, let's move on. Let's get an introduction from Mr. Omar Kennedy, who is Executive Director at AnimeCon. And I think I understand, Omar, that you guys have been putting on a lot of competition. So please introduce yourself and maybe say just one word on the topic this evening.
Hi, yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. We are very excited to be part of this conversation this evening. I'm from AnimeCon. I'm one of the co-owners of AnimeCon along with Melissa Young. And AnimeCon is the Eastern Caribbean's largest pop culture convention and one of the largest events in the Eastern Caribbean as well. And we are pro esports. We believe esport is a sport. Esports requires dedication, training. It requires dexterity, skill, using your hands and your mind to overcome your opponents. And according to the Olympic Association Committee, there are guidelines for what is considered a sport. And there are some aspects of esport which will not fall under the Olympic guidelines. I know there are things such as Counter-Strike, which are violent games. So those would probably not fall under the esports bracket for the Olympic Association. But there are many other games which fall under the ambits of being fun and friendly and not infringing on the Olympic values. So yes, I do believe esport is a sport. I think it's a very pertinent sport, and I think going forward that we are going to see a lot of exciting things happening. And yes, and we do facilitate a lot of esports. We have partners such as High Noon Gaming and Gaming Core and Shadwayne Gaming, who host competitions almost weekly. We can have casuals, or you can have actual very deeply competitive events. So yes, we believe strongly in esports, and we think it's here to stay.
Wow, thank you. Hosting weekly events, boy, you're going to have some other sports chip in. Get into work. Fantastic stuff. Yeah, and I knew that someone was going to say dexterity, by the way. Dexterity. I would imagine that how you sit as well, your posture and your breathing and all of that adds to concentration. There are many things I'm sure that could fall into the definition of a sport. Thanks, Omar. Let's move on now to Damien Best, who is a well-known sports journalist here in Barbados. Good evening, Damien. What's your take on this?
Good evening to Alex. Good evening to everyone involved in this discussion. Thanks so much to BOA Kendia for the invite. Very interesting topic. One that I only got a taste of during the pandemic with the Barbados basketball team, who did quite well during one of the virtual tournaments they had for this hemisphere. Because for me, I deal with the realm of real physical sports and reporting on that. So for me, esports has not really impacted in my psyche that it is a sport just yet. I can see that there are people who are passionate about it, but when I look at the things that athletes have to go through to prepare themselves for what you would call the real physical stuff, it's a stark contrast to what some of the esport athletes will be doing. But I am all for anything sports, but I am not completely convinced that it is fully sports. I can see it has its own realm, its own following. And then from my end, how do I convince my audience who I deal with daily that this is a sport? So we've got a long way to go. I think that I'll start on that premise and I'll listen to everybody else.
Craig, you have your hand. Would you like an immediate retort?
I think he brings up a good point. It's great to hear. What I would say is that there's already an existing audience that's exceeding probably your existing audience and fan base directly for you. That shows the need. That comes on a competition side. But he mentioned, is it Damien, that the hours and the preparation. I'm going to give you a quick example just because you referenced basketball. And I think we have some guys that are probably going to touch on that in a little bit. But I have two personal individuals that I know. One coaches, the other one is actual athlete on what we call an NBA 2K team. And if you were to hear their regimen of what they do, it would shock you, Damien. Like, this is something to report on. The amount of hours that they put in is equal to that and exceeds that of an actual NBA player when they're actually training in season. And the reason why they have to put so much time, their season only spans about 3 months. And they just had their tournament last weekend where the Philadelphia 2K team ended up winning the prize pool. But the amount, and I think Omar did a great job of prefacing in terms of what goes into that skill level and the amount of repetition that you have to do within a skill, no matter what it is. I mean, for that, I don't like golf, but golf is a sport in itself, right?
Hey, you were going good.
I was going good, right? In terms of playing it, I mean, love it, go ahead, but then watching and all of that, it's something that probably that if I played a team sport in my day. So when you simplify it and go back to it, it is tough for us to grasp. But the audience that is in the various tiers, so I don't want to get too deep. I'm sure this will come up later. But if we talk about the various tiers of esports games and titles, tier 1 versus tier 2 versus tier 3, the level that is going in as a team, they have an actual coaching staff that goes down the line to the form of player development, nutrition. You'll be amazed, but I'll stop. I'll let somebody else jump on.
Thank you, Craig. That's insane. And it is interesting. It was interesting to hear Damien speak. Obviously, I guess I come from his kind of generation, and this is generational thing. He said, a real physical sport. And I just want to interject really quickly, just before we get to the rest of our panel, to say, I remember when people were saying, I was working for a record company in London, and people were saying, content, how people take in content is different. They're going to be watching things on their phones. And I remember laughing and said, that will never take off. When the pandemic started, I was like, yeah, right, you're going to have a party online, whatever. I think we do have to sort of allow our minds to be open at the idea that the world has changed. Not is changing, but it has changed, and it has changed quickly. All right, let's move on. Mr. Fallon Ford, you former national track athlete and now an exercise physiologist.
Hi, good night, everyone. So on topic, I am kind of on the fence. I am agreeing with Damien, and I'm also agreeing with Craig. Initially, obviously studying physical education and sports science, this debate has been going on in classes from my first year probably till straight out to masters, because you guys are talking about esports, but some people were talking about things like chess and cheerleading and stuff like that. By definition, all the definitions, people would have said that sport required for it to be considered a sport, they will have to have extreme physical exertion. They should have a governing body, a whole set of parameters that were set for sport. But obviously, that definition was created and we're in the year 2022 right now. So I too have an open mind to this. I'm kind of siding more with Damien, but I'm in this conversation with an open mind.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I've got two national basketballers. Maybe we'll start with Keelan Phillips. He's a national basketballer, and he's also a BABA e-basketball player, captain, no less. Keelan, how are you? Good evening. Tell me something, man. Our athletes play esports athletes? Talk to me a bit about it. You're a man who's done both.
Hey, good night, everyone. I think it is. It is one of those things where I have been lucky enough to practice and actually represent Barbados both in what people would say actual basketball and in the esports realm as well. And some of the preparations and stuff that we had to go through in terms to prepare for this tournament was actually a lot more than what people think. When I was actually talking to some people about it, it wasn't like we just decided one day, oh, well, we can just show up on a weekend and we can just play. Like, we had to go through a lot of practices, and all of us on the team played basketball in real life as well. So that kind of helped with it. It wasn't like it was just like several random people that didn't know the actual sport as well. So I think that also plays into a point about why it can be a real sport, because you have to know stuff about the actual sport if you want to compete at very high level. So
Keelan, do you play one player and the guys can play? Do you play yourself? How does it work? Sorry.
No, that's fine. Each of us play an individual player. For instance, Josh, somebody else in one of the speakers here, he plays the point guard on the team. So like each of us played in different spots. There are 7 guys. The technology is not at the point where you could sub in during the game like in a real life basketball game. So if the other 2 guys on the team, they would switch out per game. So it's not exactly like how it would be in real life, where if a guy gets tired or whatever, they would just sub out. Once the 5 guys start, those are the 5 guys that will play for the entire match, but it can change per.
And those guys get tired? Like, are you seeing their energy levels?
Yeah, it's like stamina and all that would affect how your players shoot. So like if your stamina is low, then he can't move as fast. He kind of does the things that would kind of happen in real life when you're playing basketball. When you are playing a sport in real life and you get tired and you don't run as fast, you don't shoot as well, all those little stuff. So it does affect the player as close to as real life as you can basically for a video game. But,
Thank you so much, Keelan. Let me introduce Joshua Lowe. Now, you mentioned him. He's also a national basketballer and e-basketball player with BABA. Good evening, Joshua. Now, gosh, tell me, is there anything that you enjoy in your e-basketball that you don't find?
That's a very good question. Hi, good night. Before we tackle that, before I forget, I just want to say that I'm definitely on the side that it is a sport, esports being a sport. The definitions that you gave earlier, I do believe it takes a tremendous amount of skill. It takes things like hand-eye coordination and critical thinking. And it is for entertainment purposes at the end of the day, just like any other sport. So I'm of the opinion that if things like chess and darts are sports simply because of the coordination and skill it takes, then esports definitely should be a sport. And as Keelan was saying, we have to prepare almost just as much, if not in some cases more, than for the physical sport. Because someone who plays basketball in real life and basketball on the game is almost identical the rigorous training you have to go through regarding team building, regarding leadership, regarding building chemistry with the people you're playing with. It has to be a sport, because everything that goes into a physical sport, almost every attribute goes into the esport. So I definitely agree with that.
Okay, fantastic. Wow, I think we've got a good all-round view right now of the discussion. We've spoken to everybody on the panel. So I guess the point I want to make here is that esports obviously exists. Craig told us there are audiences already that we don't know about, massive. It's growing, and it can exist alongside sport. So I don't know if we definitely have to define whether it's a sport or not, but maybe we can talk about opportunities, because ultimately, I mean, that would be a nice positive discussion point there. The opportunities in esport for Barbadians or for former athletes or for people who it didn't work out for. Anybody have any ideas along those lines in terms of the opportunities for people in esports that maybe are not available if you're not an athlete? It's a bit of a case of the revenge of the nerds. Now, that is a dated reference. That's an old movie. But the idea was that if you were a jock, if you were an athlete, you weren't nobody in the school. But now the esports sort of creates a whole other business, and it's big business, isn't it? Any thoughts?
Absolutely, Alex, and thank you. And you took the words out of my mouth. As I was a nerd before nerds were cool, so I really get that, and I love the Revenge of the Nerds reference. Now, with the esports, there's a different set of training which you go through, and the gentlemen were absolutely correct. There's a different set of training that you have to go through, and the reason why persons subject themselves, sometimes I have to say subject themselves, because sometimes the training is so onerous and so stressful on the body and on their hands that it can, have, debilitating features for you. So esports last year, I believe it was a $1.1 billion industry, and it's double in size over the next 4 to 5 years. So the industry is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. The video game industry alone is absolutely massive, over $500 billion, if I remember correctly. So, there is a lot of money to be made in this. There are gaming houses, people who have gaming teams, and they are sponsored by pro athletes, they're sponsored by rap stars, they're sponsored by billionaires and philanthropists who want to see their teams advance to the finals and get the cred, get the money, the whatever have you, the prestige of being a top athlete. As someone in Barbados who facilitates esports, we do have teams who travel through the region competing at various events in Trinidad, in Guadeloupe, in St. Martin, in St. Lucia, Jamaica. And they travel all over the region to compete at these various conventions. In fact, about 5 or 6 years ago, we had an event called Babylon Brawl, and persons were competing in New York. And after they competed in New York, the finals, they came down to Barbados at AnimeCon and competed here. And, these are a lot of things that happen. A lot of video game finals, esports finals, actually do occur at AnimeCon, and it's been growing rapidly over time. And there are a lot of persons, a lot of the time we were thought of as just wasting time in our bedrooms playing these video games and whatnot. But we're now finding that persons who have been dedicating the time to this can make money. They're getting sponsored by local companies in Barbados to travel and do these things. So there are opportunities, and it's no beginning. Once with the sensitization to the general public that these guys are not just sitting down and wasting time, that this is actually bringing money, it can bring in foreign exchange. Some prize monies are over $1 million. Hosting these events can bring in millions of dollars in foreign exchange as well, something that AnimeCon is also working on. So, I met Craig a few weeks ago in Washington, and we discussed a lot of these things. Mm-hmm. So, we do believe that Barbados is nascent. We're fledgling in esports, but there is so much raw potential in what we have here. In the next 3 to 5 years, I'm telling you, we are going to top of the world.
Omar, my mind is blown. I don't know why it's blown, because fantasy leagues in all sports are so popular across the world, right? People who sort of just make up their own team and bet and follow their team. So, I'm not surprised. I don't know why I'm surprised, should I say, about esports. Anyway, Josh, then Craig.
Hi. It's interesting you bring up the point of esports being a kind of pathway to people that might not be as athletically gifted as some. The 2K League that Craig was referencing, the athletes and stuff, a lot of the top players in 2K League, obviously I follow it, is a the most popular league in esports basketball right now. A lot of those players, the best ones, actually played some level of NCAA basketball or college basketball. And it really shows in terms of their skill level and their ability in the virtual game. So maybe it might not be necessarily for ones who are not athletically gifted, but maybe past their athletic prime and want a new challenge, because you can still use the knowledge you would have gained from playing real life basketball to have an advantage on somebody who may just be good at video games but might not necessarily have a basketball background, as Elon was saying earlier.
Right. That's so interesting that would translate so literally. Craig, you wanted to make a point. I see your hand is down now.
I wanted to go back to the question. Now, this is all great. You wanted to know about the opportunities. And this is a question that comes up so much. I'm a parent of 2 young teenage boys. How do I convince my wife that this is a viable career path for them? So when you look at the esports, we talk about it from an ecosystem, right? So we've touched on teams, we've touched on the individual players, we've touched on leagues, we've touched on tournaments. But when we kind of bring that together, then you have Omar who's producing an event. So we have those event organizers that are in there. We haven't even touched on the game publishers or the third-party event operators or the venues in itself and the people that are needed to run
or
them.
the programmers, right?
So that's the broadcasting side, right? Because after American football, right, esports is the largest growing in terms of viewership after American football. So we have to think about when we trace the money and see where's the monetization for this coming. Yes, the individual athletes, I'm going to still call them an athlete, can stream and have their own brand. They're considered an influencer. But how do we get those fans to then support them and watch them? Well, that's where the broadcasting is a play, where we now have people that are being trained to become a caster. They shorten it, right? And they're streaming alongside the game, and they're giving you a play-by-play on what's happening. But there's an art to that, the technology behind that. We have the entrepreneurs that are opening up land spaces throughout the world. This isn't the arcade that we may think of that popped up. I'm going to date myself, but I remember growing up, those are the arcades you go into. No, now it's a full all-out LAN center or an esports bar where I can still be in the physical world watching that NBA championship or baseball or hockey or whatever it is, the Olympics in itself. And at the same token, I could be competing in a tournament and in multiple tournaments or having a meeting with my team in that same space. Right. So those are the entrepreneurial areas. So there's a whole ecosystem to this that just brings it. I didn't even touch on the coding and the development and the VR side, where we're in a need for more content, gamification in play in terms of the metaverse and where we're going. You opened it up, Alex, with Industry 4.0. So a lot of this is surrounded. Even cryptocurrency is really coming from a gaming perspective, where those coins were already built in to various gaming platforms and games as a whole. So the ecosystem is plentiful. Yes.
So much opportunity and a level playing field for people like us from the developing world, because everybody has their opportunity online. I'm going to insist on e-athlete at least. Kadir, e-athlete.
There you go.
And anyway, Damien, it's great to move right on to you, because I heard Craig mention there, time for broadcasters, and journalists to get on board.
Yeah, great points there by Craig. My issue, from what I've seen from the esport aspect of it, is that when I give it from my perspective of sports, and sitting down and watching a real reel of basketball, physical basketball being played. I'm talking about real life basketball being played. And watching the energy on the court and the movements. And I've watched some of the stuff from the time it was on during the lockdown. And one of the things that kind of throws you off is some of the movement of the players and some of the graphics and stuff. I know that those things have a big part to play. Games are becoming more realistic and stuff. But sometimes, for me, it's hard to, and I'm catering for audience because I'm just a conduit for my audience. I still got to tell the story. So hard for me to convince my audience who are traditionalists, most of them traditionalists, that this is, a sport and not just a video game. So I'll go on that. that part of it. And that part is very, very interesting because I know graphics are getting better and better, but still, I mean, I've seen video games where cars doing 200 kilometers an hour, and if in real life he could really move that fast, his hand-eye coordination be that quick, you know. So there's still to get that over on the broadcast side and try to convince somebody this is, you know, the new frontier. You should watch this. If he had to choose between this and honestly speaking, going to watch the NBA Finals, the Warriors beating the Celtics. He's going to watch the Celtics play the Warriors. You know what I mean?
He could watch all if he don't got to choose between the two of them. But like your point, I like all of your points. I think it's going to be obviously technology is going to be improving. I have a question, guys. I mean, because it's so obvious that this divide in this debate is going to be generational. I see Joshua put up his hand, and I'm glad because Josh, I was coming to you to ask about it. I guess whatever you want to talk about, please talk about it. But I would ask you as well, if is it a generational thing, and do you think ultimately it should be embraced by the Olympic movement?
I didn't hear the last part. The last part again after the generational thing.
Yeah, is it a generational argument and discussion? And do you reckon that esports, in short order, will be embraced by the Olympic movement?
Over time, I believe it will. Right now, I think that some people still will have a hard time embracing it, but as time goes on, I believe it can only get easier. Touching on Damien's point.
Yeah, Joe. Damien said the men moving funny. Damien said the men moving funny.
I don't necessarily, first of all, I don't necessarily think it's a competition per se with real sports, because myself as a gamer, I can still watch the NBA Finals first. And my basketball was my love before video games. So if I had to choose between watching the Warriors and playing a video game, I don't think anybody in the right mind going to watch esports over real basketball. But with that being said, the video games, as technology advances, yes, they're going to get more realistic. But things like, for example, the movement system in the video games or the racing games, on one hand, yes, I can fully agree that some of the stuff that is done in the games are not realistic. But in the same breath, I don't believe that they have to be a want of real life to take more skill or to be more acceptable by the people watching them. I believe that if, let me say, playing basketball and I might not be able to, in real life, shoot from 40 feet like Steph Curry consistently, like Steph might do that at 1 or 2 games. You might be able to do that at an extreme consistent rate in 2K, but it can still take some set of skill for you to do that consistently. If not, everybody that played the game will be able to come and shoot from 40 every time, which is not the case. So whether it's realistic or not, I believe it will get more realistic as technology gets better and people get better, graphics get better, all that stuff. But in the state it is right now, I still believe, realistic or not, the fact that everything within esports takes some level of concentration, skill, hand-eye coordination is not possible to be done by everyone, and that in itself makes it a talent, in my opinion.
Nice. Excellent. So many interesting points. I see, Keelan, you're going to speak next. So remember your point, but I also am going to ask you, what about fighting games? Are fighting games esports? Over to you, Keelan.
Guys, just one second. I just wanted to put in a small insert right here. I wanted to say that I agree.
That's Omar. Go ahead, Omar. Hello?
Some kid that from halfway across the world play 2K, but the reality of it is sometimes, especially with the younger persons who grew up with broadband, the real athletes are the persons who compete from behind the screen, and they may see basketball and the NBA once in a while or whatnot, but the true athletes, guys, are the ones who sit down behind their screens and spend 80 and 100 hours a week, with a controller in their hands, trying to become the best in the world.
Right. Cool. Off you go, Keelan.
I'm gonna answer the fighting question at the end. The 2 points that were made, I want to address in terms of Damien's point about if somebody's gonna choose the NBA Finals, the real life NBA Finals over the virtual thing. I had a bit of a challenge trying to explain to some of the older folks from the previous generation of if this is a real life thing or not, because as I say, it's from a different time that may not as be as open to newer things compared to back then. But all things have evolved over time, and I think that's actually even another separate argument in real life sports in general. Like some of the older folks from sports in general tend to always go back to like the older days, not and like sports has evolved, and so they will have newer people who will think a different way from them. But in terms of the older picking the real life, well, I will say that the NBA has had like a 70-year head start on esports in general. So like, I mean, if you ask a real life person to watch, I don't know, something versus WNBA is not as popular, but that's also a real life thing. But WNBA has only been in existence for 25 years compared to something else that may have been in existence for 50. So real life stuff has a head start already in that regard. So I mean, it's only natural that they would choose something that has an established popularity and is more well known versus kind of like the newer stuff. I forgot my second point, so I can answer the fighting point. I hopefully remember my second point after. It's fighting games. I think yes, because I think the same way how you need hand-eye coordination for different various sports in terms of basketball, Rocket League, and all these types of different things. I think you still need to put in the work and the practice to do the fighting games as well. Obviously, it is not as physically taxing because in fighting and MMA and other stuff like that, you're putting your actual body on the line. Or in fantasy games like Tekken and that sort of that, it's kind of unrealistic, but it's still not something that any and everybody can just do. This was leading up to my actual point that actually made me remember. Josh talked about how Steph Curry in real life could just like shoot from 40 feet out. He's like the only person really who can do that consistently. In the video game, and even some of the best players, they can't like necessarily shoot from that far constantly all the time. That's something that only certain people can do because they're the best at what they have done. So it's not even just not anybody can just come in and do that. The same way in real life, not anybody could do what Steph Curry and LeBron and some of these real life players do. Not any and everybody could do what some of the gaming people do as well.
Right. Excellent and interesting. I guess I would like to mention, I see your hand, Damien, 1 second. I just want to mention here, for me, the elephant in the room here, ladies and gentlemen, is the physical health element and elements of fair play, friendship, respect. I mean, I guess as a former national athlete and still a very keen athlete, one of my favorite things about sport is how it transforms my body and my mind, my emotional state, gets my heart rate up, the raising of the heart rate. But I guess we get back to darts and all of that. But I guess that would be my hesitation on wanting to or I would be fearful that esports would get on the same level of sports, and then we would have a whole generation essentially raised on the couch. I don't know what you think about that. I'm sure you guys have a response to that. But go ahead, Damien.
Well, Alex, you hit the nail on the head. I was going to ask the guys, because I heard the guys talking about training and doing these different things. Did any one of you guys have to do a beak test to get into the games? Did you have to do any ladders? Did you have to do any sprints, any hill work? Did you have to do, I don't know, gym work 4 times a week, to play the games? Those are the kind of questions that people are going to ask. My second thing I'm going to throw out there is that a lot of this esports activity is based on the technology and what people have in their household. Now, remember during the 2K tournament, some players were almost booted off of the platform, so to speak, or they dropped out while playing the sport. And almost like a forfeit in the aspect of that. So the other team won. So a lot of this is premised on how good is your internet speed and all the other things. There are many factors that come into play into this esport arena. So it's not like me taking up a basketball and going on a basketball court and playing against four other fellas and playing some, some rounds of basketball. It involves a lot of the technical stuff. So how do we get the children on the physical part of it or the infrastructure to ensure that everyone, once they're into it, they're connecting and moving at the same time, especially here in Barbados. I'm just saying.
Okay, interesting. Make it a level playing field in that respect. This is fascinating.
Correct.
Damon, I want to remind you that those esport athletes and the people in the business of esport are spending hours and hours doing other things. It may not be physical activity, but they are working in other areas because it is a different thing entirely and format. Josh, then Craig.
I think Fallon
had his hand up for a while. No, yeah, I was about to say it. Just like he could speak.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I was saying that, Alex, what you said, you said Craig just now, that you call them e-athletes. So the whole conversation is esport a sport. Yes, both sides have good points, but can we put them on the same level? And I think that's what Damien is saying. Yeah? Yes, you have hours of training, what's not, but can they be put on the same level? I'm not saying that I'm against it. As I said before, I'm open to it. Obviously, as an educator, I saw where the benefits of technology came in, especially in COVID. But also as an educator, physical educator, what you said is very important, Alex. We have children who do not want to get off the couch. They literally just want to exercise their fingers. And chronic diseases are becoming a problem, right? So can we put them on the same level? Yes, you put in hours of training for basketball, the esport basketball, but do you have the same physical benefits of actual basketball, right? All I'm saying is no one is saying that there's no space for esport. It's here to stay. But the question asked, is esport a sport? And can we essentially say they're on the same level? I can't agree with that. So I agree with you. I would meet them halfway and say, call them e-athletes. That's fine.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up. I'm sorry about that, Falcon. Thank you. Chronic diseases, not becoming a problem, have been and are a problem in Barbados. Massive problems. 75%, 80% of the beds in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital are taken up by people with chronic diseases. It is an absolute, it is a killer. And it also really affects the productivity of our nation on every level. So it's something that we definitely must discuss. I don't know what the order here is. Josh, Craig, I see all of you guys.
Yeah, I'll jump in and be quick on it. So has anybody experienced virtual reality? Has anybody put on the goggles as of yet, albeit the Oculus, PlayStation VR?
I've not done it yet, no.
So there are so many titles related to fitness that are being used that way. We saw during the pandemic having to stay home. So instead of me having to go ahead and get an actual physical trainer to come over there and do the things, I can put on my Oculus Quest. Just showed my wife the other day. She doesn't want to keep them on too long, but just to show her the level of exertion that's happening. So I have two different boys. My youngest son, don't have to tell him. He'll go outside. He trains on his own. They both play soccer, right? Football. They get outside, they do their thing. My older one needs to be told a little bit, or he will stay on a little bit longer than needed. Well, what I'll teach them is there's a 20-20-20 rule. After 20 minutes of being in front of a screen, they need to get up, look 20 feet away. And this is research that's been done just to kind of reset and refocus. But I put on the Oculus on the whole family, and then we set it to a boxing game. And I kid you not, even myself included, I could barely get, it was 3 rounds, if you can make it to 3 rounds, or not getting knocked out. But I put it on, the first time I did it, I couldn't make it to the 3rd round. 2nd round, I was knocked out. But both of my boys put it on, they finished doing it, they were able to win the match, and when they were done, I kid you not, sweating. They were literally sweating, and this is about a total of about a 7-minute routine in what it's it's going. So that's what I think, Damien, you were mentioning about the physical exertion. Are they doing ladders? We're so programmed already as a society, those that are not immersed in this industry. And trust me, I wasn't always in it. I was an avid gamer, just more recreational. But our conversation has to be focused on the elite athlete. This is the pro gamer, on where it is on one of those tier levels. And they are training. There's already been peer-reviewed studies of the amount of hours that they're putting. They've showed that those who train and actually do physical exertion as part of their routine daily and then enter a tournament versus another cohort, another group that doesn't do that same level of physical activity are outperformed by those that are doing the actual physical training. So we have now research that's supporting it. So I know it's difficult to believe hand in hand, but there is a regimen that needs to be done. There is an opportunity for us to at least be open to the fact that, yes, we can combat against these that are out there by introducing something new. Somebody doesn't want to get off of the couch to go to the gym. They're worried about the stigma of how I look and how do I get them in front. Then I might not be able to afford to bring Johnny or Susie over to come train me. But I might be able to go ahead and me just going ahead and logging into XYZ, whatever its program, whatever platform it is, and doesn't have to be VR. There's other ways to be able to use it. But in doing it, we've seen that during the pandemic. If you go on YouTube, you watch it, you learn it, you do it on your own. So all of this is coming based on esports and gaming.
Yeah, it's skilling. You are very skillful. Those are some good points to make back. Let's hear from, is it Camila? Camila, yeah, we haven't heard from
Camila.
Go for it.
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to touch on the point of physical exertion, because I believe at the beginning, Alex, you would have said that not all sports require physical exertion. So I don't think that using physical exertion to determine whether or not a sport is a sport should be a factor anyway, because there's, as you would have said, chess and checkers. There's
it actually
poker
is in the definition, but I think you're right. That
right. So when Damien was asking about doing drills and those kind of things, I'm like, but not all sports require you to do drills anyway. So if we're talking about sport, we can't only look at in person, face to face, that are not virtual. Not all sports that are considered sports require physical exertion anyway.
Okay, thank you for your point. Josh, and you guys have had your hand up, and I see Candia as well. How do we start with Josh?
All right. In terms of the physical exertion as well, I don't believe it compares. I don't think you can compare esports to physical sports into the level of exertion you have to do. Playing both basketball in real life and on the game, obviously, as Damien was alluding to, I never had to do a beat test or anything like that to play esports. But as the lady that just spoke, I don't remember her name, sorry about that. All sports don't necessarily require that. So for something like chess, you may not have to run a mile and a half or do a beat test to play chess. You might just have to outthink your opponent. Maybe at most exercise your hands and stuff like that for fatigue. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that what Craig was saying, that the gamers who do stay physically active usually are more primed and critical thinkers in terms of their level of fitness. The ones that don't stay active, you tend to have a lot of gamers that suffer with obesity and overweight issues. And I don't believe that it should be a case where we throw traditional sports out of the window and focus on esports. Let's bring up the children just playing video games, because then it will result in unhealthy children. I wholeheartedly agree. But a balance of both is ideal. And I think that if you play sports and are active as you should be, eating well, then playing video games 100% of the time is no problem, as long as you don't let it get out of hand and you don't stay fit.
And you make that wonderful point about the fact that the mind is always so much more agile. Your reflex is better if the body is fit, body, mind, spirit. Kendi, I see Kendi's hand up. I see you, Damar and Mr. Falcon. We've only got 6 minutes. Go, Kendia.
Yeah, so two things. I was actually going to say, if anybody is listening who wishes to speak, you can request to speak if you wanted to chime in. But I want to go on the point that Camila made, in that, yes, we
we acknowledge that chess is a sport, but then there are people out there who will tell you and go die hard that it isn't a sport, because you go back to the same thing. You don't need any physicality, so to say, other than moving a chess piece. And if you're going to look at it from that perspective, then it can't be a sport. Esports can't be a sport. And this is just me being devil's advocate to shake up things a bit. And I also touch on the point where Craig said, oh, well, there are people who get up and they do physical activities before they go to play a competition. But then aren't you still taking part in a sport before you actually go and take part in esport?
This might be a question of games versus sports. Sports and games, people.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, fantastic. Mr. Falcon out there getting on bad. Let me hear you, sir. And then we come into you, DeMar, the Rosenstein account. Keelan.
Right. So as Kenya said, and I'm one of those people, as I told you, this has been a debate from the time I was doing physical education at BC to the time I did masters at UE. Chess and checkers, I am of the school of thought that they are not sports, because based on the definition and I said at the beginning, definitions change and stuff like that. But if you look at the definition, chess and checkers are games; they are not sports. Okay, if you want to,
they're a pastime.
Exactly,
a hobby.
Listen to me. And a lot of chess and checker players in my physical education classes were very hot and very upset. But if you look at the definitions state that those are games; they are not sports. And again, I go back to the question. The question asks: Are esports sports? Can we put them in the same category? And my answer is still no. Yes, I understand what Craig is saying about the VR games. Initially when sport just thought about those, but the majority of the games are not that. Yeah, the majority of the games are played with remote controls. You understand? Yeah. So that chess and checkers conversation will never fly with me, because if you come to me and ask me about chess and checkers, they're games, they're not sports.
Very nice, great. And as a presenter, I want to tell you all, as a sportscaster, sports commentator, I wouldn't have minded esports in my day. So I didn't have to wait on an opportunity. The opportunity is right there on my computer waiting for me. Let's get my boy here, Keelan, and then Omar. Guys, we only have a few minutes.
How to say this? I understand both sides for sure. It's in terms of the side about chess and checkers maybe not being a sport, because while somebody was talking about the physical exertion of it, I was thinking to myself that not all sports, especially if you consider chess and checkers a sport, considered the same amount of physical exertion. All sports in general don't have the same amount of physical exertion. For example, while track and field and stuff like that is an individual exertion, a sport like football and maybe basketball, especially American football, is a lot more contact compared to any other sport. So that's a different varying level of physical exertion. And I completely understand why some people could use the argument that not physically doing like a beat test or having to do certain things would be a very good reason as to why esports would not be considered a sport. I personally don't think it has to be on par with sports per se, just like how there are various different sports that are not on the same level, but we all call them sports. Some sports are not on the same level physically as other sports, but they all present a different challenge physically and mentally. So esports kind of presents a different, especially mentally, because it was said that esports athletes' lifespan is a lot shorter mentally because of the mental toll that they have.
Burnout, man.
Go through. Burnout is a real thing. Yes, it's a real thing in sport, and I know in sports there's that combination, especially when you're tired. All these athletes know when you're tired and you have to think as well. Boy, it is the problems. So I know
oxygen.
It's not reaching your brain. So I think that's a different element for esports. So I don't think we can completely dismiss it as not being a sport, but it doesn't have to be on the same level as other sports. Just a different level, but we can still call it sport.
Lovely point. It's a minute before the end. I just want to ask, I see some hands in the air from Craig and Omar, and I want to ask both of them on top of the points they're about to make. You've mentioned this e-basketball league. Do any individual sports have leagues, or do you find that it's the team sports that are taking off in esports? Shall we go first, Omar, and then Craig?
Thank you. I wanted to just add in one last thing. I think the traditional versus the new, the neo is a very important thing to take into account. Esports is very new. And, basketball, for example, is 100 years old. There are different sports which came under the Olympic ambit. Artistic swimming in 1984, taekwondo in 2000, badminton in 1992, BMX racing 2008, skateboarding 2020 2021, climbing, surfing. A lot of these things are different from the traditional track and field or basketball or whatever have you. And esports is very, very young. It is different. I think these guys are athletes. I think in time, persons will understand, if they don't understand now, that these guys do qualify the same way how breakdancing will be at the Olympics in 2024. That it is just something different.
Omar, don't get me vexed. Don't get me vexed. This has been going so nicely. Yeah.
So ladies and gents, basketball, since we're talking about that, was invented as a game, not as a sport, right? So it was invented as a game, evolved to become a sport. And if we take that in its same way, it's difficult for us to see. Esports is so generalized. Even the E-League or the NBA 2K, your traditional gamer will not consider NBA 2K, FIFA, Madden, those sports titles as traditional esports. It goes back to those tiers. So those League of Legends, the Dota, if you look at the Dota World Championship, where that's more of a game about strategy and decision-making and the fast level of it, then the incitement of an arena and everybody watching this individual come to life and the energy of the broadcaster that's behind it, that brings in the competition, the level of the game. And when you add a team to it, now they're competing against it. Individuals emerge because they're so good at it. The ninjas of the world become the top level, just like those are your Currys. So it's difficult for us to fathom because we're so set in video game. We played it here. There's no way that can be a sport. And if we can kind of remove that, we'll see where it's going.
Yeah, I like this idea. You're right. When it's all produced and there's crowd noise and, esports has a lot of advantage in those areas. Last word from Josh.
All right, I can be quick. Just to add on to what Keelan was saying regarding Fallon's point with the physical exertion again, even if you rule out things like chess and checkers, to me, there's still games like, for instance, darts, or not games, let me say sports, for instance, darts and archery. I just don't feel like no matter how much time passes that esports are going to be on the physical level of things like track and field and basketball, where you might have to be vomiting up after a day of training. But I still don't think it needs to be on that level to have consideration. So as Keelan was saying, I still think there's a place for it, so long as there's a place for any sport which does not require extreme being the key word, physical activity, and things like archery and what's not, where you can just stand and do something, stand and throw a dart, billiards, pools, stuff like that. As long as they can be considered a sport, even though they're not as demanding as things like American football, rugby, soccer, I believe that esports can gain consideration.
Awesome. There's value in it. It doesn't have to be a sport for it to be of value. Craig, one more point.
So notice the last one, because this is very important if we with our whole topic. It was brought up earlier about the issues of accessibility. Black and brown minorities we are truly the minority in this realm and in this particular world. So that's the need for more education on us being able to get in. So we have to remove the stigma, understand the stigma of where this is, shift the culture, because this is an opportunity for our younger generation to be able to get into tech careers. Even if they don't become the esports athletes, they can now get positions in this field. And that's kind of the way, especially on my end, I'm at a historically black college and university. So what we're looking to do is we don't want to be left behind. So we want them to know what is happening, because a lot of those titles, those top grossing, revenue producing titles that are being competed against for esports, they don't look like individuals that look like any of my boys, right, on there. So, and there's more women that we need. So it's very, their diversity, equity, inclusion is coming about into it. Barbados has a chance to really own that space within the Caribbean region and then really on a worldly platter, right? So this is the way we have to envision it, support it, and in supporting it is going to take us, yes, providing households indoor spaces where, you know, students can safely get to and be able to compete at the top titles. So that's another topic for another date, but that's kind of looking at it from a big picture.
No, it's a massive point you make. And the National Transformation Initiative is free to all Barbadians. There are many opportunities on there to study programming, to study video game creation, etc. And I want to double down on your point that this is opportunity for us. This is an area where the playing field is level, whether it's an playing field or not. Let me take this opportunity to thank our panelists, Mr. Fallon Ford, Mr. Craig Skilling, Mr. Omar Kennedy, Mr. Joshua Lowe, Mr. Keelan Phillips, and Mr. Damien Best. You guys were great. If there are any burning questions around the group, last hand up can get it right now. But I would like to thank them for their time. I have learned so much about esports, and it's certainly got a lot of things burning away in my brain. Let's hear from you, Mr. Falcon.
Right. So I was just saying that I don't think that people really saying the people who are more on the fence about the traditional are not saying that there's no place for it. By saying there's right for it. Understand?
Oh,
and stuff like that. But that, you hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you, but you're coming and going. So you're saying it's not that you're saying there's no place for it. It's just not the same thing.
Definitely, okay. Definitely, there's a place for it. It's not the same thing, right? I keep it from us like. Right.
Yeah, you go ahead. Oh, sorry. I hope I didn't cut you, Falcon. 6 minutes after 8 o'clock right now. I'm a late. Thank you so much to our panel, and thank you so much to the Barbados Olympic Committee for setting this up. It was brilliant. Venetia Cadogan and Candia Brathwaite. I hope you guys were pleased with the results, and I will call this here discussion to a close. I'll see you guys online. Shoot some hoops later. Thanks so much, guys, and good night.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Have a great night.